Greetings to all, and welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to explore with you another terrible case. The cost of love. What makes up our destiny? Without a doubt, the choices and acts we make. But occasionally fate steps in to disrupt the status quo. And that's when it's said that there's no escaping it. The protagonists of today's tale, Joseph and Olga Connell, experienced a similar fate when their paths unexpectedly collided and remained together forever. Unfortunately, because of their horrible destiny, the lovers were unable to fully enjoy each other. Approximately 2 a.m. in Wilmington, Delaware, on September 23, 2013, multiple gunshots were heard close to the Paladin Club condominium. Witnesses noticed a man and a woman lying on the ground when they rushed to the site. A short while later, someone reported the attack and its victims over the phone to emergency services. When the doctors arrived, they started with first aid. The victim was still alive despite the gunshot wounds to her face and blood loss, but her partner did not exhibit any signs of life after being hit in the back of the head, presumably killing him instantly. Regretfully, time was not on his side. When the police realized what had transpired, they asked the woman what had happened, to which she replied incoherently before passing out. After being taken to the hospital, the victim lost hope of survival and passed away midway through her stay. Specialists at the location discovered paperwork and personal items. It was discovered that Connell's newlyweds were the deceased. Since none of the valuables, including the cell phone, wallet, handbag, and diamond ring Olga was holding, were taken, the incident was likely a targeted murder rather than an attempted robbery. After the young men returned home from celebrating their spouse's 39th birthday, it was later discovered that the victims had been attacked outside of their house. About 25 rounds were fired into their backs by the cunning attackers. Investigators needed to determine what ended the couple's relationship and whether a protracted domestic conflict served as the inspiration for the murder. Connell family. Joseph was born into a prosperous and close-knit family. His siblings were Kelly, his younger sister, and John, his older brother. The children used to fight all the time over nothing when they were younger, but after their parents got divorced, they joined together and became inseparable. Following the end of their relationship, the boys continued to live with their mother. Eventually, a woman's life was touched by the appearance of another man. Everything went according to plan for the new marriage. The father was replaced by the stepfather, and the family was still in need of nothing. The family had a nice, quiet neighborhood. People went about their daily lives during the day and got together around the round table in the evenings to talk about personal happenings. Joe was a good guy who was always on time and diligent, but these traits were more related to his studies and work than anything else. Aside from that, he was a happy boy who was the life of the party. The young man had dreams of being a businessman and founding his own company since he was very young. His efforts were successful because of his resourcefulness and financial savvy. The protagonist of the tale, along with his closest buddy Christopher Rivers, opened a machine shop and a specialty store in Tville. The young men were well known in the neighborhood as successful partners who had made it all the way from the bottom. The friends not only established their business but also had a common idea. They were very amicable. The introduction tale. Before he met Olga, a stunning Russian woman, Joseph was a devoted bachelor. The young people started talking to each other on a dating website. Since they were already very experienced and mature individuals, they had no trouble finding topics of conversation. A female acquaintance who had recently moved to the US disclosed on social media that she was going through a divorce. The man spoke about his past relationships and his future goals. Both interviewees were outgoing and intelligent individuals with comparable interests and worldviews. It follows that it is not strange that their feelings developed into something more over time. Joe made her an offer after realizing one day that he could no longer picture his life without his lover. Olga reciprocated. The only slight was that the bride had not yet been introduced to the family, but the man was unafraid of this because he was secure in both his decision and the family's response. His relatives were mesmerized by the chosen one's character and attractiveness. They couldn't believe a woman could win over a hot, loving relative's heart. The couple's relationships progressed quickly. Joe carried Olga everywhere he went, confident in her good looks and charm, and he did not hesitate to show his affection for her. But as time went on, it became evident that the female's genuine Siberian temperament, where the adored was born, hid behind her sensitivity and malleability. Everyone was in awe of her boundless enthusiasm and enterprising spirit. She seemed to be capable of anything. Connell was so happy and in love that he made the decision to not put off the wedding for very long. Maybe he was so eager to tie the knot that he was unintentionally expecting what would happen next. It's common to describe these folks as being in a rush to live. I'm sure you've all seen examples of them in your daily lives. Investigation. Following the incident, the police spoke with members of the public, passers-by, and the victim's neighbors. Maybe some of these people had information that could be clarified. Sadly, none of them had witnessed what had transpired. Still, a lot of people fled after hearing gunshots. Some also reported hearing male voices shouting just before the shooting, and they appeared to be fighting with the newlyweds about something. Not far from the crime scene, there was another violent crime. Numerous shot casings from 2 distinct types of weapons were discovered by forensic scientists, indicating the presence of multiple attackers. Given the volume of gunfire, it seems likely that the pair was originally given the death penalty. Nobody could have survived such a shootout. The thieves waited for the youths to get back from the party so they could execute their plot. The birthday celebration was held in a well-known bar, and friends as well as some Connell family members attended. After dancing till midnight and getting fatigued, everyone headed home. They had a great time. The pair pulled up to the house, parked, and made their way toward the front door, which is when the burglars realized it would be best to execute their plan. Interviewing the victim's relatives was the next stage of the investigation. When police questioned Joseph's parents about the couple's purported foes and critics, the man's mother and stepfather said they had no knowledge of it. The newlyweds appeared to have no enemies at first glance, yet almost everyone has jealous people. Besides, not one of the recently married couples mentioned it. Simultaneously, the investigators received some intriguing details. It turns out that on the eve of the wedding, Joe and his sister Kelly got into a fight over a pricey family ring covered in diamonds. Experts estimated its value to be around $220,000. Relations between the families did not improve after the argument, but they all insisted that Kelly would never have committed the crime, especially since it turned out that the ring had stayed on Olga's finger during the attack. However, it was necessary to verify the version regarding the concealed offense. In an odd coincidence, Kelly was among the first responders to the crime site that night, even though the victim resided in a different neighborhood. At the time, Kelly was in the vicinity. The backstory behind the ring: the couple intended to wed in the Virgin Islands. The engagement ring was the sole item that derailed the wedding plans. According to family tradition, the mother bequeathed the family gem to her son. Yet the jewelry had already been gifted to the youngest daughter for her wedding, which occurred a decade prior. Joe removed the ring from his sister covertly, replacing the costly stones with zirconium so as not to upset the established tradition. Then he surreptitiously gave the ring back to the mistress, and he placed diamonds in Olga's engagement ring. The protagonist's action is hard to explain, especially in light of his financial circumstances. Perhaps this is how he chose to follow the rules instead of breaking them. None of the women were supposed to have predicted it, but things had not gone according to plan. After noticing the swap, Kelly started to hunt down the offender. It makes sense that the younger sister told Joseph how furious she was about her brother's behavior when she found out. But the latter was furious because he believed the sister was only upset because she wanted to wreck the wedding and break family customs. In one form or another, the ceremony happened. Kelly gave her job as her excuse for missing the occasion. Simultaneously, the woman chose to ruin the party as payback and sent Olga a snarky note, which is how the unsuspecting bride found out. The brother-sister relationship deteriorated after that. There were fights between them on occasion, and they frequently spat insults and reprimands at one another. Then came an incident that threw everyone for a loop. A mysterious robbery marked the beginning of the newlyweds' married life in the Virgin Islands. The honeymoon was enjoyable for the couple. Olga and Joseph rode a yacht, fished, sunbathed on the beach, swam in the sea, and sampled exotic food. There was more than enough money for these activities. Joe was pleased that the business was expanding and making a significant profit. Back home, the newlyweds spent $100,000 on a new convertible Mercedes they purchased. Since Olga was not one of those women content to sit on her husband's coattails, she began assisting her husband. Olga, highly educated and well-read, fluent in English, and with her past experience working on the stock exchange, entered the business with ease and began handling administration duties. As soon as the attractive blonde took charge, Joe and Chris saw an increase in customers. A week before the attack near the condominium, someone broke into the young family's home while the couple was preoccupied with work. An unknown individual stole jewelry and family heirlooms, including Olga's diamond ring. After the Connell couple returned home, the head of the family noticed the unlawful entry and called the police. Surprisingly, law enforcement officials found no evidence at the scene. The search for the burglar yielded no solid results. Kelly was under intense suspicion because detectives suggested the robbery was either professionally staged or the work of a seasoned criminal. Many believed the sister had every reason to stage the incident. Perhaps unable to forgive her brother for his past actions, she decided to teach him a lesson. However, the investigation of the burglary soon hit a dead end. A more horrific crime occurred to the spouses, shifting the police's focus to the investigation of a double murder. Search for a motive. Kelly appeared distraught during her interview with the police. She cooperated fully with the investigation and didn't hide anything. She discussed the disagreement with Joe and even showed the correspondence related to it. In one of the messages, Olga suggested that Kelly had orchestrated the recent robbery. Kelly denied this, but the investigation could not exclude her from the list of suspects, and, as Kelly later admitted, she felt significant pressure in certain areas. Despite the apparent motive, at no point during the interrogations did the victim's younger sister change her testimony or become confused. During Joe and Olga's funeral, the sister appeared devastated, but it was clear she loved her brother and mourned his passing. Concurrently, other theories about the murder were being explored. Because Joseph Connell was a desirable groom and his wife was a rare beauty, jealousy was considered a possible motive for the crime. It's possible that not everyone around the couple shared their happiness, and some of the former youth may harbor resentment and seek revenge. Yet the detective's suspicions were unfounded. It turned out that Joe had amicably parted ways with his former friends. They had long since married and were happily settled. This also applied to Olga's past relationships. She had divorced her Russian husband and severed all ties. An offended man would unlikely go to great lengths to settle scores with his ex-wife, much less travel a significant distance across the ocean to do so. In this regard, this theory was dismissed. Still, the search for enemies of the newlyweds continued. At the same time, the investigators could not ignore the ongoing discord between brother and sister. Greed is a common motive for crime, so after interrogating Kelly, the investigation shifted focus to Garrett Catalano, her husband. Garrett loved his wife deeply and would do anything for her. It is conceivable that he might have committed a double crime at her behest. During the conversation, the potential suspect behaved calmly and convincingly. He not only confirmed his wife's innocence, but also had a solid alibi. However, Garrett expressed doubts that his brother-in-law had earned his multi-million-dollar fortune through legitimate means. Catalano subtly hinted that Joe might have been involved in illegal drug trafficking. Over time, his words gained traction as others came forward claiming that Joe was secretly selling steroids and making a substantial profit. Secret witnesses identified another man known to be one of his associates. Thus, the detectives came upon Christopher Rivers, a longtime friend and business partner. Best friend Chris, unlike everyone else, didn't seem to be worried about what had happened. He continued with his routine. It made sense that he had the dual responsibility for the business. Handling clients and suppliers kept him busy, yet his unquenchable energy and mental strength produced strange suspicions. One day, detectives decided to interview the man. He explained that on the fateful night, he was supposed to attend the celebration but couldn't because he was tied up with work. Despite their long friendship and the premature death of his partner, Christopher unexpectedly made unflattering comments about Joseph. He claimed that Joseph had changed recently and seemed unscrupulous. Rivers also didn't shy away from expressing doubts about Olga. He had heard rumors that Joe's wife was not as simple as she appeared and had come to the U.S. to represent the interests of the Russian mafia, suggesting that a successful marriage only freed her to pursue those ends. Although his companion's explanation for the family's substantial income demanded careful verification, his suspicions stirred the pot. Perhaps there was some truth to his claims, or maybe it was just speculation. Joseph's connection to the underworld soon became apparent. The information was not a secret and was publicly available. It turned out that a few years before meeting Olga, her lover had been accused of illegal possession of weapons and even served a respectable term for it. During his time in prison, the man made some new acquaintances, and it's possible that after serving his sentence, local authorities pulled him into the trade in illegal substances. Perhaps over time, Connell crossed someone's path, and they decided to take him out. But whether the connections acquired behind bars were the motive for the attack remained a question. As detectives worked on the shady business, an interesting detail came to light. Harry Cook, a well-known drug dealer, claimed he had overheard Rivers making negative remarks about Joe on more than one occasion. Rivers had admitted to him that he and his business partner were selling illegal medical drugs through an auto parts store, but that his buddy was greedy and distributed the profits unevenly. Chris was in greater need of money and had huge debts, while Joseph himself spent all the finances on a lavish lifestyle. For this reason, Rivers joked that he wouldn't mind if his friend disappeared and later seriously asked Harry if he wanted to help him in this, to which Harry replied no. Thus, Rivers' image took on a darker hue. In light of this, the investigation questioned Chris multiple times. However, he had an alibi at the time of the murder. The man was at home, which was confirmed by external and internal video surveillance cameras. At the same time, specialists decided to check his assertions and examine the accounting documents of the firm. It turned out that despite the large revenue, the business did suffer losses. However, as it turned out, numerous embezzlements were not related to Connell. It was Rivers who was responsible. Police informants reported that Chris had been using heavy substances for a long time, and lately, his addiction had gotten out of control. This explained the numerous debts and shoplifting. Against this background, the man developed paranoia. That's why he repeatedly confessed to acquaintances that they wanted to kill him. Additionally, it became known that he was personally involved in the sale of steroids, and Joe blindly believed his comrade and was in the dark about what was happening right in front of his nose. In addition, Joe's attention turned to the new relationship. This information became known thanks to the testimony of a mysterious informant. A sick mind. Detectives came upon the man after examining Rivers' phone records. He was known to make many phone calls on the night of September 23rd, despite being at home at the time of the crime. His phone did not go silent. All calls were subsequently cleared from the device, but experts had no trouble reconstructing the story. Most of the calls belonged to Joshua, a former FBI informant. When police contacted Joshua, he admitted that he often used Rivers' services. One day, Chris Rivers made him a tempting offer: $65,000 for his companion's head. The big money undoubtedly attracted the man. However, Joshua did not want to participate in the case directly and found other hitmen to this end. He turned to Dominic Benson and Aaron Thompson. The mercenaries cost him $5,000, which he received from the customer as an advance payment. Eventually, the confusing crime picture came to light. The best friend had sentenced his buddy and his spouse to a sad end. Was the motive behind the crime a grudge and a desire for sole ownership of a shared business? No. It was the $1 million that one of the partners was entitled to as an insurance payout. It turned out that long before the appearance of Olga, The former partners had secured the business and insured their lives. In the event of the death of one of them, the other received the amount to pay off the mortgage on the machine shop. If Joe died, the amount received would be enough to pay off all of Chris's debts. But here's the problem. His partner got married, and all payments were due to the legal spouse. So Rivers decided to take out both of them at once. The conversation that took place between the organizer and his accomplice on the night of the crime indirectly confirmed this. Although the communications between the men were encrypted, it was obvious that Rivers was concerned about the success of the operation. To better analyze the communication between the two men, detectives seized phones from the four suspects. Thanks to the mobile devices, their movements on the night of the crime were recorded. Dominic and Aaron were at that moment near the house of the young couple Connell. Curiously, the video footage that confirmed Chris's alibi played against him. The cameras show that the man is nervous and does not let the phone out of his hands. After detectives reached out to Joshua, he didn't put up a fight and surrendered to authorities to mitigate his punishment. During the interrogation, the man agreed to a deal with the investigation and testified against the customer. Thus, Christopher came up with a cunning plan. He wanted to use the quarrel between his brother and sister to frame Kelly. During the investigation, it was proved that the robbery at the Connell house was the next stage of the criminal plot. Following Christopher's instructions, Joshua broke into the couple's home and burglarized it. However, the target was a controversial family heirloom, a diamond ring. Coincidentally, Olga was wearing it that day. If the plan had succeeded, the investigation would have followed a false trail and blamed everything on Joe's sister. But this was not enough for Rivers, and after the crime, he tried to tarnish the name of his friend. As it turned out later, the death of Joe and his lover was the result of a cold-blooded and carefully planned crime for money. Justice. In 2014, Chris Rivers was indicted on several charges. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, as well as conspiracy in the first degree and solicitation of a felony in the first degree. His co-defendants were also tried. The trials took place separately but parallel to each other. During the trial, it was proven that Aaron Thompson was the one who held the weapon. He was therefore found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. The felon received 2 life sentences plus 45 years. His buddy Dominic Benson was acquitted on the felony charge because he changed his mind about shooting at the last minute. Therefore, for first-degree conspiracy and aiding and abetting criminals, he received only 5 years in prison, thanks to his active cooperation with the police. For the murder conspiracy, Joshua got the same sentence. As for the main instigator of the crime, Chris Rivers, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 50 years. We can forgive another person anything, but success, goes the famous saying. Despite his young age, Joseph was a remarkable man. He built a business, found the love of his life, except that he was not left with the opportunity to enjoy happiness together. The couple could reach new heights, build a strong family, and have heirs. However, the thirst for profit and the dislike of his partner made irreparable adjustments to their measured life. Money, one of the old and common motives for crime. Christopher's pernicious addiction and greed ruined several lives. During his years in prison, the convict will surely be cured of his pernicious addiction to substances, but will he be able to stifle the guilt that is supposed to come with time? Unknown, or maybe, in his case, the voice of conscience will never be heard. After all, not everyone dares to spend the rest of his life in a constant struggle with himself. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.